When the neighbors walked out that morning, mouths dropped, coffee cups paused mid-sip, and one lady literally dropped her yoga mat. There it was, my house, painted in the boldest, brightest, most glow-in-the-dark neon green you could imagine. It looked like a sour lime had exploded all over my siding. From across the street, it practically hummed under the sun, daring anyone to blink. People were frozen. One HOA board member clutched her pearls. But not Karen. No. Karen stormed up my driveway, fists balled, her voice sharp like the edge of broken glass, screaming, "This is a direct violation of HOA standards." I just smiled. "You said I had to repaint it, didn't you?" And then, just as she opened her mouth again, a black SUV slowly pulled into the cul-de-sac. 3 more HOA board members stepped out, looking absolutely stunned, but not as stunned as they would be once they found out what I had in store next. Let's rewind. It started 6 months ago, and at the time I was just tired. Tired of being overlooked. Tired of being pushed around by people who thought a clipboard made them royalty. After my wife passed away 2 years ago, I bought this house in quiet Cedar Pines to start over. It was small, simple, had a patchy lawn and shutters that had once been navy, but had faded to a dull, bruised gray. Still, it was mine, and I was proud of it. The HOA didn't take long to introduce themselves, a stack of rules, a list of violations, and a smile that didn't reach their eyes. That's how I met Karen. She was the HOA president, self-appointed and self-important, with a bob haircut and a wardrobe full of pastel sweaters. At first, she just sent notes. "Trim your hedges. Trash bins must be brought in by 8 p.m. I complied, quietly. I didn't want trouble, but the notes kept coming. "Fence is too high. Mailbox pane is chipped. Your grass is too yellow." Always signed, "Best regards, Karen." I tried to see the good in it. Maybe she just cared about the neighborhood. Maybe she just wanted things to look nice. But it never stopped. I saw other houses in worse shape, but no one else had notes tucked in their doors or photos attached to violation warnings. One morning, I found her in my yard. Not on the sidewalk. Not knocking. Actually in the yard, measuring the distance between my front steps and the bushes. She had a clipboard in one hand, a tape measure in the other. I asked, politely, what she was doing. Karen didn't even flinch. "Your house is bringing down the aesthetic integrity of the neighborhood," she said. I filed an official notice. I wanted to tell her where to stick her aesthetic integrity, but I didn't. I was raised better. Instead, I nodded, then closed the door, sat on my couch, and let the weight of loneliness settle back in. The next week, I got the letter. Mandatory repainting required. Violation 14B. Your home's exterior is in violation of Article 9, Section A, deteriorated paint surfaces. Please select an HOA-approved color within 30 days, or a default beige will be applied at your expense. Beige. I stared at the list of colors. They were all variations of beige: almond mist, oatmeal whisper, soft taupe. Even the names made me want to gag. I was furious, not because I didn't want to fix up the house, I did, but because it wasn't about improvement, it was control. Karen wanted me beige, quiet, invisible. I sat in that frustration for days, and then something in me snapped. I went online and ordered 6 gallons of the most blinding neon green paint I could find. Not mint, not olive. I mean full-on alien skin in a sci-fi movie green. I checked the HOA booklet. There was no specific ban on which color, just that it had to be fresh, finished, and non-offensive to neighborhood standards. So I made it fresh. I made it finished. And I waited. The painting started on a Saturday. I had a friend from church help me, a kind woman named Linda who used to teach art. She said she hadn't had this much fun in years. People slowed their cars as we worked, some laughing, some shaking their heads. I offered everyone lemonade. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning was when the yelling began. Karen was already outside by 6 a.m., hands on hips, staring like my house had just insulted her personally. Her voice carried down the street. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. This will not stand. I stepped outside, coffee in hand, calm as a monk. You said repaint. I repainted. She stomped toward me. Neon green is not on the approved list. I held up the HOA handbook, which I had printed, highlighted, and tabbed like a college thesis. It says approved finish, not specific colors. She snatched it, eyes scanning the page. Her mouth twisted. She knew I had her, at least for now. But it didn't end there. 2 days later, I came home to find a bright orange sticker slapped on my front door. Pending hearing, HOA board review. They were coming for me. I expected that. What I didn't expect was the knock on the door later that night. When I opened it, a teenager I'd never met stood there, clutching a manila envelope. He had scruffy hair, nervous eyes, and he glanced over his shoulder like he wasn't supposed to be here. "You don't know me, sir," he said, "but I think you need to see this." He handed me the envelope and ran. Inside were photos, emails, handwritten notes, all of them about Karen, and something she'd done years ago, something that could blow this whole thing wide open. I hadn't just painted my house neon green. I had cracked something much bigger, and someone didn't want it getting out. What happened next turned everything upside down. The envelope sat on my kitchen table like a live wire. I didn't touch it for 10 minutes. I just stared at it, heart pounding in my chest like a drum. I don't know why I was so nervous. I didn't even know the kid who dropped it off. But something about the way he looked over his shoulder, like he was being followed, made my skin crawl. Finally, I opened it. The first thing I saw was a printout of an email chain. Karen's name was all over it. It was between her and a landscaping contractor, 3 years ago. The email thread showed that Karen had authorized thousands of dollars in neighborhood improvement spending without the board's approval. More than that, she had used HOA funds to re-landscape her own backyard. I flipped through more papers, photos of receipts, a typed-up list of transactions labeled reimbursements in bold red ink with check marks beside large dollar amounts. $800 for a new stone patio, $600 for fencing repair, $200 for garden sculptures. At the bottom was a handwritten note. They think she's doing it for the HOA. She's not. She's been stealing. This needs to stop. No name. Just that one line. I sat back, mind reeling. This wasn't about paint anymore. Karen wasn't just obsessed with neighborhood rules. She was covering her own tracks. Maybe that's why she came down on me so hard. Maybe she needed distractions. Someone else for the HOA board to focus on. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking of the kid. Why would he risk bringing this to me? Why now? Why not take it to the board? The next morning, I took the envelope and drove across town to see someone I trusted, Paul. He was an older man, maybe late 60s, retired, and had been on the HOA board for 2 decades before Karen took over. He stepped down when things got too political, as he put it. Paul looked through the documents, shaking his head slowly. "I had a feeling," he muttered. "She got rid of 3 good people last year, just pressured them out. Now the board is full of her friends, or folks too scared to speak up." "You think they'd care about this?" I asked. Paul folded his hands. "Not all of them, but there's one person who might. Rachel." Rachel was the newest board member, young, sharp, and not afraid to challenge Karen when the rules got twisted. I'd seen her once at a neighborhood event, arguing calmly with Karen over how fines were being issued. Paul gave me her address and said he'd reach out to her too. That same day, while I waited for word from Paul, I got hit with another violation notice. This one was serious. Non-compliant exterior color. Final warning. If home is not repainted within 10 business days to an HOA-approved palette, Legal action may be pursued, and daily fines will apply. Karen had escalated, but something about it felt desperate, like she was trying to push me into a corner before I could fight back. I decided not to repaint. I wasn't going to back down now. That weekend, I held a barbecue. I invited every neighbor on the block. I set up a grill in my front yard, put out chairs, played old jazz on a Bluetooth speaker, and served burgers and ribs with iced tea. People came, not everyone, but enough. Some were shy at first, others curious. But by late afternoon, the laughter was real. Kids played tag in the cul-de-sac. A retired couple brought lemonade. Someone even said they liked the green. That was when Rachel showed up. She walked straight over to me, holding a paper plate and smiling. Heard there were ribs. I nodded. And drama. We stepped aside and I showed her the envelope. Her face went cold as she flipped through it. If this is real, it changes everything, she said. You sure it's legit? I handed her the receipts. I didn't make them up. Rachel slipped them into her bag. Let me take this to a real auditor, quietly. If this checks out, we're going to file a formal complaint. You just stay calm. I agreed, but calm wasn't how Karen played. That night, I woke up to a loud thud. I jumped out of bed, heart hammering, and looked out the window. Someone had dumped 2 cans of brown paint across my driveway. They spelled the words, "Never win," in dripping, ugly strokes. I stepped outside, and the sharp smell of paint hit me. My gut told me it wasn't a random act. I bent down, took a picture, and noticed tire tracks. Someone had parked right by the curb and then peeled out. I didn't call the cops. Not yet. Instead, I knocked on a neighbor's door the next morning. Her name was Darlene, and she had a camera pointed right at the street. She was nice, loved gardening, hated drama. But when I showed her the photo, she frowned and said, "Give me an hour." When she called me back, she said 3 words that made my stomach twist. It was Karen. The video showed her parking at 2:13 a.m., stepping out with a hoodie pulled over her head and emptying the cans on my driveway. Then she got back in her car and sped off. Darlene sent me the clip. Now I had everything. Proof of misuse of HOA funds, proof of vandalism, proof that Karen had gone from strict rule enforcer to straight-up criminal. But just when I was ready to take the next step, just when I thought I finally had control, I got a letter. Not from the HOA, from the city. Notice of property violation. Unauthorized structural modifications attached was a fine for $3,000 and a demand to appear in court. Karen had filed a complaint outside of the HOA. She had gone above them. She wasn't just trying to control me, she was trying to destroy me. And that was when I knew, if I didn't act fast, I'd lose not just my house, but the life I had tried to rebuild. I stared at the city's letter, barely able to breathe. $3,000? Court? Unauthorized structural modifications? I hadn't touched a single beam in that house. Karen must have lied, again. But this time, she'd taken it out of the HOA's hands and brought in real legal trouble. And with my savings stretched thin after the funeral and the move, a fine that size could wipe me out. I called the city office first thing the next morning, trying to get someone, anyone, to explain what this was about. After being passed around to 3 different departments, I finally reached a clerk named Janet who sounded half asleep. "Yes, the complaint was filed last week," she said, typing loudly in the background. "According to the submission, your home underwent unpermitted structural repainting that affects light reflectivity and visibility from the street. There's also a claim about hazardous color exposure causing distraction to drivers." I blinked. "Hazardous color exposure? You're saying my green paint is a safety hazard?" "That's what the claim says." "Who filed it?" "Anonymous, but it was delivered with HOA stationery attached. That's all I can say." Anonymous my foot. It had Karen's fingerprints all over it. I hung up and paced my living room, clenching my fists. She was using the city like a wrecking ball to finish what she couldn't do with passive-aggressive letters and fake HOA citations. I needed help. Rachel answered my call after the second ring. I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Come to my office. Bring that letter. We're not letting this go." Rachel was a lawyer, something I hadn't realized until that day. She didn't flaunt it. She worked out of a small space downtown, walls lined with books, a certificate from NYU on the wall. When I handed her the city letter, she read it carefully, then pulled up the HOA charter from her drawer. "She's using Section 16B," Rachel muttered. "That's supposed to apply to new structures, garages, decks, expansions. Not color, never color. This is a stretch. So what can we do?" "I'll send a response. Official. If they want to make it a case, fine. I'll represent you." My shoulders dropped in relief. "You'd do that?" Rachel nodded. "This isn't just about a house anymore. It's about power and abuse and someone who thinks she can manipulate the system without consequences." I felt like I could finally breathe again. Back in Cedar Pines, though, things were boiling. Word of my neon green house was now trending on a local Facebook group. Someone had taken a drone shot. The caption read, "Is this the new Cedar Pines mascot?" The comments were wild, some laughing, some furious, others calling me a hero. But then something strange happened. A woman knocked on my door one evening. I didn't recognize her. She was older, maybe in her 70s, with silver hair tied up in a scarf and soft, tired eyes. "Are you the man who painted his house green?" she asked. "Yes." She nodded slowly, then pulled something from her coat. It was a faded photograph of a house from 40 years ago. Same street, same lot, same color. "I lived here when I was a girl," she said, voice trembling. "Back then, this was the brightest house in the neighborhood. My father painted it green so I could always find my way home." I looked down at the photo. It was almost identical to mine. "I just wanted to say, thank you for bringing it back. I thought it was gone forever." She squeezed my hand gently, then turned and walked away. I stood there for a long time after she left. For the first time, I felt like maybe this fight wasn't just mine. But peace didn't last. 2 days later, I came home to find my yard trashed. Lawn ripped up, trash scattered across the porch. My mailbox ripped from the ground and stuffed into the bushes. Spray painted on the side of my garage were the words, "Get out, freak." I dropped everything, called Rachel, called the police. An officer came by, took photos, and filled out a report. But I knew the truth. Whoever did it, whoever Karen may have whispered to behind closed doors, wanted me to break. But I didn't. Instead, I printed out the photo that old woman gave me, framed it, and hung it in my living room, right across from the couch. A reminder that what I was fighting for wasn't just my home. It was memory. It was identity. It was the right to not be erased. Then came the board meeting. Karen called it last minute on a Wednesday night with only a 24-hour notice. The agenda said, "Review of homeowner violations and special vote for forced compliance." I showed up 10 minutes early. So did Rachel. The room was packed. Neighbors, board members, even a few people who lived 2 streets over. Karen sat at the head of the table, looking smug in a pink blouse with rhinestone buttons. She opened the meeting with a sharp voice. "We're here to address the ongoing situation on Redwood Lane, specifically the property painted in neon green, which continues to violate the community standards of Cedar Pines." She glanced at me like I was dirt on her shoe. Rachel stood up. "Before you vote, we'd like to introduce new information." She passed copies of the misuse of funds documents to everyone on the board. Karen's face went pale. Gasps echoed through the room. One board member, Mr. Langston, stood up. "Is this real?" Rachel nodded. "Every receipt, every email, all real. And she's been using the HOA's power to silence and punish anyone who gets too close." Karen slammed her hand on the table. This is irrelevant. We're here to talk about the house color. No, Rachel said firmly. We're here to talk about leadership and accountability. The room went quiet, but before the board could speak, before any vote could be cast, Karen's phone buzzed. She looked down. Her hand trembled. Then she stood up slowly and whispered something into the ear of the vice president. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and walked out. Everyone stared in silence. What none of us knew was that while Karen was at that meeting, someone else was sneaking into her backyard, and what they were about to find would change everything. The next morning started with a knock on my door, not frantic, but urgent. It was Officer Delgado, the same one who'd taken my vandalism report a week earlier. He looked different today, more alert, eyes sharp, lips pressed into a tight line. "We need to talk," he said. I stepped aside, and he walked in. Without much small talk, he got to it. Last night, around the time of the HOA meeting, we got a call from a neighbor behind Karen's house. Said they saw someone sneaking through her backyard with a flashlight. Thought it might be a prowler, but when we got there, what we found wasn't just trespassing. I stiffened. What was it? Delgado pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. I blinked. It was a shed, small rotted wood, partially hidden by tall shrubs and vines. But the door had been busted open. Inside, stacked in plastic tubs and locked filing boxes, were HOA documents, hundreds of them. Records, he said. Financials, votes, complaint forms, all going back nearly 10 years. Most of them never submitted to the board. Some of them forged. My breath caught in my throat. Delgado scrolled to another photo. It was a spreadsheet, handwritten. At the top, it said, "Diversion budget, private use." Beside it, Karen's name, multiple times. She'd been hiding them? I asked. Looks like it, he said. One of our guys found a ledger with 3 names blacked out, cross-referenced with her email records. It appears she removed board members by staging rule violations against them. Then she replaced them with people she could control. I sat down. It was bigger than I thought. Karen hadn't just bullied me. She'd built an entire throne out of fear and fake paper trails. Do you know who went into the shed? I asked. Delgado shook his head. Whoever it was left before we got there, but they dropped a flash drive at the scene, encrypted. We're running it now. I felt a strange mix of dread and hope. Someone out there was working behind the scenes, and they were getting closer to something. Before Delgado left, he gave me a warning. Things might move fast now. If Karen realizes she's cornered, she won't go quietly. She didn't. 2 days later, Rachel called. Her voice was tense. She's trying to dissolve the board, she said. What? She sent out an emergency HOA-wide petition, claiming the board is corrupt and needs to be disbanded immediately. She's using fear to rally homeowners, telling them their dues are being misused, blaming it on me. But we have evidence. She's not fighting in court anymore. She's fighting in the street. We agreed to meet that night. Rachel said she wanted to show me something, but when I got to her office, the lights were off. Her car wasn't in the lot. I waited 15 minutes, then 20, no sign of her. I started to worry. Just as I pulled out my phone to call her, a text buzzed in. Blocked number. She's fine, but if you don't back off, next time it won't be just a missing meeting. I froze. I tried calling Rachel, but it went straight to voicemail. The next morning, I drove to her place. Her mailbox was full. Her windows were dark. I knocked. No answer. By noon, the whole neighborhood was buzzing with rumors. Karen had posted a statement on the HOA bulletin board and online page. Due to a conflict of interest and recent unauthorized legal threats, Rachel Thomas has been removed from the HOA board. We are restoring peace and dignity to Cedar Pines. People were confused. Some believed her, others didn't. But I knew better. Rachel hadn't stepped down. She'd been silenced. That night, I sat in the living room staring at the green walls of my home, feeling like I was living in a war zone. The house that once symbolized hope now felt like a target. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to undo it. I couldn't give Karen what she wanted. Suddenly, a knock came at my door. I flinched. It was Darlene, the neighbor with the security camera. She held up a USB stick. "I think you'll want to see this," she said. She walked in and handed it to me. "My camera didn't just catch Karen painting your driveway. Last night, it caught someone leaving her backyard after that shed was broken into." We loaded it up on my laptop. The footage showed a figure, hood up, face hidden, climbing over the fence with something bulky under their arm. The camera zoomed just enough to catch a flash of light when they turned. I paused the video. My heart stopped. On the person's backpack was a school crest, a local high school emblem, the same one the teenager who gave me the envelope had been wearing. It was him. But why? Why would he sneak into Karen's backyard? Why did he know about the stolen money? Who was he? Before I could start connecting the dots, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Rachel. She was calling from a different number. Her voice was shaky. "I'm okay," she whispered. "I had to leave town for a few days. I'll explain everything, but listen to me carefully. Don't trust anyone on the board right now. Not even Langston. Karen's not working alone." "What do you mean?" "There's more to this, and I think you're in deeper than you realize." I looked around my house, suddenly feeling the weight of every wall closing in. Then Rachel said one last thing before the call dropped. "They're planning something for the HOA community picnic this weekend. Don't go." And that's when the lights in my house flickered, then went out completely. Power. Gone. I stepped outside and realized it wasn't just my house. The entire block was dark. Only Karen's lights were still on. Her house glowed like a lighthouse in the storm, mocking me. Something was about to happen, and whatever it was, I knew I had one chance to stop it. The blackout wasn't a coincidence. I knew it the moment I saw Karen's porch light still burning like nothing had happened. While every other home on the block sat in darkness, hers glowed with smug defiance. I stood in my yard, cold air pressing against my skin. Neighbors stepping out onto their porches, confused, murmuring. What happened to the power? Did someone hit a transformer? Is it just our street? I kept my mouth shut. Something about this wasn't technical. It was calculated. Back inside, I lit a few candles and tried calling the power company, but the line was jammed. I turned on my portable radio, hoping to catch some kind of outage report, but the stations all buzzed with static. That's when I realized my phone had dropped to 1 bar. And then, no service at all. It wasn't just the lights. Karen, or whoever was helping her, was cutting communications, isolating the block. For what? That night, I slept on the couch with my boots still on. I kept the flashlight in one hand and a baseball bat under the coffee table just in case. Every creak in the house, every gust of wind brushing past the windows, made my chest tighten. I didn't fall asleep. I just waited for dawn. When the sun finally rose, the lights were still out. But Karen's weren't. That morning, someone spray-painted "Troublemaker" across my front fence, in red. No one had heard a thing. Darlene came over around 9 with 2 cups of coffee, her hair wrapped and her voice low. "You're not safe here right now." "I can't leave," I said. She nodded. "I know. But you should know. Some folks are saying you caused the blackout." I froze. "What?" "Karen's going door to door, telling people your house overloaded the grid, that you've been warned, and you're retaliating because of the HOA. I laughed bitterly. "You believe her?" "Of course not. But not everyone thinks like me." That afternoon, I noticed a black car parked 2 houses down. Unfamiliar plates, tinted windows. It never moved, just sat there, watching. I wasn't paranoid. I'd seen enough to know when something wasn't right. Then, right around sunset, A loudspeaker crackled from the HOA's clubhouse across the street. "Attention residents," Karen's voice rang out. "Due to recent disruptions caused by non-compliant homeowners, our annual community picnic has been relocated to my residence. We invite all who support unity, safety, and true Cedar Pines values to join us." I stepped outside and watched as a stream of neighbors, maybe half the block, walked toward her lawn. Fold-out chairs, picnic baskets, coolers. Some waved at me, awkwardly. Others didn't look my way at all. Darlene joined me at the sidewalk, arms crossed. "This isn't a picnic, it's a rally." And that's exactly what it was. Karen stood at the center of her yard under a white canopy tent, a microphone in one hand and a binder in the other. She gave a speech laced with fear and fake smiles about restoring peace, protecting the neighborhood, and removing those who threaten the harmony of Cedar Pines. I wasn't named, but I didn't need to be. Every eye flicked toward my house. She ended with, "It's time to take back our streets." That was when the same black SUV I'd seen before pulled into her driveway. Out stepped a man in a suit, broad shoulders, sunglasses, phone clipped to his belt. He didn't look like a contractor or a neighbor. He looked like a fixer. Karen turned toward him and nodded. He gave her a small black folder. That night I received a new letter, not from the HOA, but from a private real estate firm. Notice of intent to purchase. Compulsory acquisition in progress. Due to ongoing neighborhood instability, we are pursuing legal rights to purchase the property at a fair market rate. Your presence has been deemed incompatible with community standards. It wasn't just HOA threats anymore. They were trying to buy me out, force me out. I called Rachel again. This time, she answered immediately. "They're using a loophole," she said. "Karen filed a petition to label your house as a nuisance property. If they gather enough signatures and the city signs off, they can pressure a buyout under something called the Neighborhood Stabilization Clause. It's rarely used, but it's legal." I couldn't believe it. "They want to erase me," I said. "Everything I built." "They want to erase the truth," she corrected. That night, I made a decision. I printed every document Rachel had sent me, every photo, every email. I burned them onto flash drives. I even printed the security footage Darlene captured. Then, I placed each into manila envelopes. I walked house to house in the early morning, before the sun was up, slipping them under doors and into mailboxes. Every neighbor got one. I didn't leave a note. I didn't add a name. I let the truth speak for itself. By noon, I started seeing curtains fluttering, people stepping outside in small clusters, talking in hushed tones, holding the envelope like it was radioactive. I'd lit a fire, and by sunset, it caught. That evening, someone knocked on my door. It wasn't Rachel. It wasn't Darlene. It was a teenage boy with messy hair, wearing the same high school jacket I'd seen on the camera footage. The same kid who gave me the envelope weeks ago. He looked scared, tired, but determined. "I think it's time I told you everything," he said. Then he looked over his shoulder just once before stepping inside. And that's when he said the words I never expected to hear. "Karen isn't even supposed to be living here." "She's not supposed to be here," the boy repeated, stepping cautiously into my living room. His hands were stuffed in the pockets of his hoodie, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Karen, she's not even on the deed. The house isn't in her name." I stared at him. "Then who owns it?" He swallowed. "My grandfather. She was married to him, briefly, until he passed. She never transferred the title. She's been squatting, legally skating around it with old paperwork, forging HOA records to make it seem like she has more power than she really does." My head spun. This wasn't just about her being controlling. She wasn't even a real homeowner. "She bullied her way in," he said. "Took over the HOA, forced the real board members out, started writing checks to herself through fake companies she created." She's got 2 LLCs, Sunpine Maintenance and Cedar Bliss Groundskeeping, both registered to a P.O. box downtown. I looked at the kid hard. How do you know all this? He pulled out his phone and tapped open a folder. Because she tried to make me her assistant, said I was smart enough to be useful, dumb enough to be quiet. But I recorded everything. He played a voice memo. Karen's voice came through, sharp, smug, unaware she was being recorded. Let them protest. The city won't care. They never do. By the time anyone figures it out, I'll have bought their silence or buried them in fines. I grabbed the flash drive he handed me next. This has everything. Emails, contracts, audio. I hacked her cloud account. I know it's illegal, but I didn't know who else to trust. I called Rachel, told her everything. She told me to bring the flash drive immediately, but we didn't get the chance. Because at 3 a.m., the fire started. Not in my house, in Karen's. Flames erupted from the back porch, climbing fast, devouring the fence, racing across the dry hedges. Sirens howled in the distance, but by the time the fire trucks arrived, the house was already half gone. Neighbors stood in their robes, stunned, silent. Karen sat on the curb, wrapped in a fire blanket, screaming at the firefighters to save the office first. Not the photos, not the heirlooms, the office. I watched from across the street, my house still glowing neon green in the dark. I turned to the boy. You didn't... No, he said, eyes wide. I swear, I didn't do this. And I believed him. The next morning, a city official arrived. He wore a navy blue windbreaker with code enforcement printed on the back. He met me on my lawn. We've received formal complaints. Multiple, actually, about misuse of HOA funds, falsified documents, unregistered home ownership, and now, attempted coercion of community members through property intimidation. Your names come up, but as the target, not the instigator. He handed me a statement. Karen's being investigated. There's going to be a full audit, possibly criminal charges. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. But that wasn't the wild part. The wild part came 2 days later, when a real estate agent knocked on my door with a manila envelope. Your property's value has skyrocketed, she said, grinning. Between the attention it's gotten and the pending historical designation tied to the old photo you framed. Investors are calling it the Green Beacon. They want to make it a community landmark. I blinked. Wait, what? She smiled wider. There's a documentary crew flying in next week. Apparently, you've become something of a folk hero, standing up to the HOA tyrant and winning. Everyone's watching. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Later that week, Rachel stood in front of the community with a microphone in hand. I motioned to disband the current HOA leadership, reinstate the original charter, and form a new board with fair elections. No more secret meetings, no more threats. The crowd erupted in applause. Karen didn't show up. Rumor had it, she fled to Florida to stay with her sister. The boy, his name was Cody, by the way, was offered a scholarship to a cybersecurity boot camp after his story spread online. As for me, I didn't repaint the house, not one brushstroke. I planted sunflowers around the base, put up solar lights to make it shine at night. Every kid in the neighborhood calls it the Slime Castle, and I let them, because it stands for something now, not rebellion, but resistance, to bullies, to silence, to systems that punish the wrong people, and maybe, just maybe, to a brighter future, one coat of neon green at a time.